So I work for a Catholic production company as well
Mm.
as blogging for Patheos. And one of my coworkers is a priest, and the head of our company is a priest. They loved this movie. They were so
Oh,
enthusiastic.
that's
We did,
amazing.
yeah, I did a story for the company blog, which was their reactions to it. And
Mm.
what they were mostly saying was, this is the most accurate, not accurate necessarily in every card, but true
Mhm.
depiction of the life of a priest and what it is like to be a priest that they've seen in a very long time. So,
Wow.
and I've seen that sentiment elsewhere. So,
That means so much.
so when you were building this character and putting this world together, like what was in your mind?
Well, I guess it
Oh, by the
started
way, they
with
mean the good priest, not
yeah, I
not the
assumed.
bad. Yeah, just
I
just to
assume
be clear.
that, I assumed. Uh, I mean, honestly, for me, it started from a, a very personal place, which I hope in terms of some of the expressions of faith and of Christianity is where that sincerity comes from, is because I didn't grow up Catholic. I was Protestant evangelical, but it wasn't just like I was in a churchy family. I really uh I my life and was really and my interior life was really defined by my relationship with Christ all the way up through my early 20s. And
Remember
I'm not
reading
the
that
believer.
about you.
Yeah, and so I'm not a believer anymore, but as anyone will tell you, it's a lifelong, complicated road, and I feel like a lot of who I am as a person, even as someone who doesn't consider themselves a believer today, is built on this bedrock of my experience as a Christian, and so a lot of the and honestly, a lot of the stuff in the movie of the us against them and the notion of the fighting versus meeting people where they're at and embracing also comes from my just frustration in the secular world as a in the modern times and today, and knowing that I'm susceptible to that and feeling the frustration of everyone kind of backing into their corners, me included. And so I think that's the other only way that anything sincere actually happens, is it comes from, even the stuff you're indicting, has to come from some element of self-indictment to really know where it's coming from. Um, but then the other element of it is, because I didn't grow up Catholic, because I was Protestant, honestly, there was always something growing up that felt slightly exotic to me about Catholicism. And because we were outside of it, there was something as a kid, especially, that the visual elements of it were so powerful, it almost felt a little scary. And so another element of it was wanting to, having been a Christian, but not really, never having been a Catholic, just I say research project, but that makes it sound very intellectual. It was more than that. There was my aunt and uncle, who I'm very close to, who live in Denver, are very devout Catholics, and they connected me with their priest, Father Scott. And besides many conversations with him, I flew out to Denver and had a dinner at their house. And Father Scott invited like five of his friends who were priests and a couple of deacons from the Denver area, and we had just like an evening where we had a great meal together and just talked, not really about theology, but about their lives as priests. And I am so grateful to them to opening up to me to the extent they did. And also they talked about what they feel films get right and what they get wrong about what it's like to be a priest. And one of their big pet peeves was just when it feels like kind of a cardboard cutout representation on one side, or whether it's good or bad, as opposed to a whole flawed human being. And so anyway, and I'm sure, and I'm sure I didn't get it completely. I don't want to imply they're a complete endorsement or something, but the fact that it started with those conversations, I think that probably helped.
Especially in the modern world,
Mm,
uh, where we're so involved in self-actualization and be all you
mm,
can be and follow
mm,
your bliss or whatever.
mm,
Whether it's, especially if it's a priest or even if it's a religious sister or a brother, like the idea that you would walk away from so much of what people value in secular
mm,
life.
Mm.
voluntarily. In a little way, it's also like people who join the military in a sense as well. It's like,
Yeah.
why would you do such a thing?
What
What kind of
it,
a strange individual are you that you
it
and then you meet them and your eyes are just not that strange, but
no. Yeah.
yeah. So what were they telling you that
Well,
sat
it
with
was
you?
it was funny, and this isn't the thing that's happened to me, but it's a funny thing because what you just mentioned. When I went in, I was like, okay, I'm not going to ask them about celibacy. Everybody asks about celibacy. I'm not going to leave with that. And I sat down and like one sip of wine, and they were like, "So I bet you want to know about celibacy." And they dove right into talking about. It was great though, leading off with first of all, just leading with, okay, we're going to talk about everything here, but also getting their perspective on it. But the answer to your question, one of the things that really stuck with me and that to the point where it actually made its way into the movie, was they were telling me about, and I had never thought about this aspect of it before, how when they, just go out to run errands during the day, they're wearing the clerical collar.
Right.
And so the notion that they're always of service and they'll have people coming up to them just in the grocery store and, uh, sobbing about, or coming up to them and getting into a fight with them, so yelling in their face, just a notion that they're always on stage. Um, a one of the priests told me a story, and he's like, "It's my worst moment as a priest." And he was like, he was rushing to get somewhere in the course of his day, and a parishioner came up to him and said, or maybe it was somebody else who was in the church came up to him and said, "Father, if I can just for 2 minutes." And he had to get somewhere, and he kept walking. He goes, "It's never 2 minutes. Email me." And went around the corner. He's like, that's the day I regret most. I was like, no, no. Uh, but just the notion of, and so that very much translated into, there's a scene in the middle of the movie with a character named Louise where Father Judd is
Everyone's
going,
favorite scene.
oh,
Every
well,
Catholic's favorite scene right there.
well, yeah, I mean, that ties, it ties, that came directly out of me hearing
Well,
the experience of
describe that
priests.
scene and what you wanted it to be.
So the idea of the scene is, uh, and kind of zooming back a little bit, in the first act of the movie, it's kind of Judd versus Monsignor Wicks is very obviously sort of Judd is kind of on the right side, Monsignor Wicks on the wrong side, and it's very obvious that that of course Judd would push back on that perspective, and the kind of gamified notion of us versus them perspective that Monsignor Wicks kind of represents. But in the rest of the movie, there's almost a handoff, but I want it to be a subtle thing where the gamified us against them dynamic, it doesn't stop when Wicks dies. It
Mhm.
continues with the murder mystery with Blanc. And the idea that it's subtler and it's more seductive in a way because it's a fun and it's also in self-interest. He's trying to get himself off the hook, but he's drawn into it and swept up to the point where, we kind of hit the top of it where he doesn't even hesitate in terms of there might be something, hidden in the Jesus figurine. Go ahead and smash it. The notion of he's swept up in sort of the gamified thing of Blanc's thing. And I wanted a moment where everything stopped and he just remembered why he's a priest. And he remembers what he's actually here
Mhm.
for. And he realizes this kind of drive is the antithesis of what he should be doing right now. And I wanted that to be in service to the need of another human. And I wanted it to be kind of shocking. So we start the scene with her almost as a comic character. It feels like just kind of like a obstacle he has to get
Mhm.
past so that it's not like the audience is sitting there thinking, why is he not tending to this person?
Right.
We're also as an audience thinking, oh, come on, get on with it, get on with it.
Exactly.
So that his turn is also our turn. And Richard Everett, who played Louise, and Josh O'Connor, who played Father Judd, they just played that moment beautifully. But yeah, that was kind of the intent of it.
A lot of filmmakers love to use the Catholic Church because, you got the Latin and the
Mhm,
incense and the visuals and the outfits, and there's a
mhm.
hilarious I don't know if it's intentionally hilarious, but there was a scene there's a movie made about the original Exorcist story.
Okay.
It starred Tim Dalton.
Okay.
It was a boy, I believe in St. Louis. And so
Mm,
he's there with these two other priests or acolytes or whatever they were. And they're getting ready to go do battle with the devil, with the
mhm.
devil. And so
Yeah.
they're going down the hallway, full hero shot, you know, with
Slow motion.
with him slightly in front and the hat on and the cape's flowing. And I laughed so hard because
Oh.
it was like full on hero moment. We're like, it's like Avengers Assemble, which is it's like what it was.
That's not what the priesthood
But
is
like,
like?
no, let's
Yeah, I
really
know.
mind that. I mean, I love a good Catholic horror movie. I love The
Yeah,
Pope's Exorcist. I thought it was a hoot.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But like
Well
the
well, I also
reality of it just
yeah,
gets, yeah,
yeah.
all that's there, 100%, no question.
Mhm, mhm.
But the smaller realities of it just get
Yeah,
lost.
yeah. It was funny, in that dinner, I, asked the priest what their favorite depiction of a priest on screen was, and they pointed to a movie that I never in 1,000 years would have guessed. They pointed to this Irish movie called Calvary that
Calvary, yes.
with Brendan
Yes.
Gleeson, which is
Yeah.
I should warn anyone who's listening, it's a pretty hardcore movie. It's not like
It's tough to I watched it with a bunch of Catholic friends once on
mm,
Easter.
yeah, wow.
Well, like, yeah, let's go easy here. Let's
Yes.
have some chocolate and
Gosh.
some bunnies. No, let's watch Calvary.
Wow. But I mean, what they appreciate about it, I think, though, is besides the fact that it comes straight at this, and one of the hardest topics you can possibly be talking about in terms of the abuse scandal. It also, though, what they appreciated was that Gleason's character was not a cardboard cutout on one side or the other, good or bad, but that he was a fully formed, flawed human being at the
Yeah.
center of it. Um, I also, though, talk about why there's so many Catholic horror movies. I mean, I think though that
Yes.
also
Love 'em. Well, The
it's
Exorcist. I think The
yeah.
Exorcist is one of the greatest evangelical movies.
Oh,
That
that's
didn't set
interesting.
out to be one necessarily, but it
Yeah,
really, yeah, it's not only an awesome horror film, but
yeah,
gets most of gets all of a lot of the nuances
yeah,
and the
yeah, yeah.
difficulty, and
I
yet
can see that.
nails it at the end, really, about
Yeah,
sacrifice and about faith and about all of that stuff.
I can totally see that. I was gonna say, I think also the reason that filmmakers keep going back to that well is there is just an incredible amount of power in in the visual language of the church and in the sacraments, and that there's something about it that it's almost like a light socket you can plug into and immediately get sort of
Yeah.
like a reaction from. And I think, we in our own way, we kind of speak to that in this movie. Father Judge talks about how, so much of this is it's almost like with Jesus's parables or with the sacraments. It is a form of storytelling, but it's storytelling in order to evoke things that are deeply that he believes are deeply true. And so, and I think even its use in horror movies, I think that speaks to just the kind of the fundamental primal power that those images have for so many people.
Church is 2,000 or so years old, and it
Mm,
developed during many centuries when people were not literate.
hmm Yeah,
It
visual
was,
language. Yeah.
and even today, a lot of people are not literate. So, yeah, no, plainly
Yeah.
in the world, a lot of people are
Yeah.
not particularly or
Yeah.
very literate.
Yeah.
Most are these days, but not everyone. And
Yeah.
it's like, so you have to read them the scripture because they
Right.
can't read it themselves. And you
Right.
have to show in stone and in
Mhm.
art and investments and in everything the essence
Mhm.
of what you're doing because you
Mhm.
can't just go read a book.
Right.
Go
Right,
read
right,
a
right,
book.
right, right.
So it
Right.
developed over those centuries. So you have the book, you have the words, you have all of
Mhm.
that, but you also have all this other stuff wrapped around it.
I
And
mean, I think
that's like
yeah.
we have to communicate with humans over 2,000 years. So you got to figure out a way to do that when not all of them can just pick up a book.
I mean, that's a great way of putting it. That makes so much sense. I mean, for me personally, I also, again, having grown up, going to churches that kind of look like malls,
Yeah.
going
Well,
to as a Protestant, as an
well,
evangelical
imagine
Protestant.
if you're not literate. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
what are you going and it's citing from a book and like I just think it's hard.
Yeah,
If you can
absolutely.
go read the book, then you're good to roll. But, uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
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 that was a
and
big element
humans
for
I
me.
think humans in general, and as a
Mm.
filmmaker, you know this, need more than just the spoken word or the written word. They need more than they need that, but then you also need more than that.
Well, there's the cliche with a movie that if it's a good movie, you should be able to hit mute and still follow everything that's going on. That
Mhm.
it should be able to be it's truly like a visual medium. So that element of visual storytelling, which coming from a place that was very, as an evangelical, was very much text-based and was very much kind of intellectual in that way. And for me, that was also honestly part of the draw of setting in the Catholic Church was um it had always been something that had been slightly kind of scary to me growing up, and to be able to delve into it and demystify is the wrong word because it's almost the opposite. It's almost like, okay, connecting up, figuring out like during the course of researching all of it, connecting up the sacraments and the visual language of it with the things that I was getting, the feeling that the deep feelings that I was getting from just kind of reading texts and a much more intellectual approach to it when I was younger.
Well,
So
one of our favorite phrases,
mm.
"It's a mystery."
That should have been the tagline for my movie. It could have been.
It's a mystery.
This is with a shrug.
That and very much being the both and not the either
Yeah,
or.
yeah, I like that.
But yeah,
I like that a
it's
lot.
a you just go like, "Mystery."
It's a mystery. Mystery of faith. It's true. Happens to be
Well,
true
like,
also.
when the detective was going through his the standard
Mhm.
non-believer arguments,
Yeah.
and at this point, certainly every priest,
Mhm.
probably every Catholic, at anything above the most basic level, in
Mhm.
the news and everywhere, has heard all of those. People
Mhm.
say them like they're gonna have an effect where it's like, "Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
we
which I think you
This
can
is
see in Blanc's face as he's saying them. After he says them, he has a moment of like, "Oh, man, if you wanna kick me out, go go ahead." And, I think Josh
Yeah,
plays it well because Josh answers him, very, but you can tell even as a young priest, Josh's character in the movie, it's not like you're going to yeah, it's not like you're going to snap my faith, and also this is a conversation, and so
the
in
scandals broke in 2002, and that was 24 years ago. So,
yeah, and it's still a
of
conversation that
course,
does it's still a conversation that should happen. It's not
oh,
something
yeah,
that's just in the past, but
it's
it's something
it's
that
there.
but the fact that these 2 people on opposite sides of the fence that are on that opposite side, like, so the fact that Blanc is so entrenched at the he's so, like, passionate about his viewpoint at the beginning. For me, what was important is by the end of it, it's not that they've come over to their other side of the fence, they're still the believer and the non-believer, but the fact that they've formed a respect and a relationship and the fact that they can, still love each other in this way at the
Yeah.
end, that was really, really important to me.
I was just saying to someone the other day, he was commenting that you have to be able to hear things you don't agree with without
Mhm.
freaking out. And, like,
Absolutely.
the alternative to that is that if you do have these, really strong emotional reactions when you hear something you don't like, your friends, if they hold any of those opinions, will just learn to keep them to themselves.
Yeah.
And after
Which
a while, you're living in a world in which you do not know what a
mm,
lot of your friends and family think about important issues because they're just simply not going to voice it to you anymore. And that's kind of sad, really.
which is exactly reflected also in our social media feeds. That's what you just said is a real life embodiment of slowly your social media feed becomes curated so you don't see anything that you don't agree with.
You just
And
have to
then
learn to go, well, there
yeah,
is
I mean
that. And get
so
on with your
I think you're
lives.
right. Yeah, I think you're right. As that scene was written at first, it was a much gentler scene actually. Like Blanc didn't go that Blanc didn't delve into those things and go that hard. And it was actually Daniel's instinct when we were rehearsing it that he's like, I think this will make the relationship much stronger throughout the course of it if he just unleashes. And because of all the things we've been talking about, I immediately was like, "Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right." And especially seeing Josh's character, Father Judd, kind of take that in uh, and then have this kind of like and see it it not obviously it doesn't break him, but it doesn't break the relationship that he listens to it and then gives his response to it. And then they start on a footing of equal of honesty and kind of, respect for each other. So yeah.
Now that you've done this and you've done all this work, now obviously not probably another mystery movie, but is there
Mm.
any sort of things you've taken away from the prep for this movie that might
Oh.
might find their way into another project of some other
Mm.
sort in the future? Not
I
another
mean,
Knives Out movie, obviously, but something
yeah.
else.
I mean, the reality, at least the way that I make movies, because I don't find a script that's out there and buy it and direct it. I come up with an idea from the seed of
You're
it. It
kind of the
has to be
one-stop shopping right there.
completely. I'm one stop shop. Yeah, and that means for me though, every process of making a movie, from the first germ of the idea to seeing it with an audience and like talking with you about it, all of that is it's something that is a first of all, it's several years of my life, and it's almost like in a superhero movie where they go into like the tank and they hit the gamma rays and they like, super grow.
Sure.
It's a growth machine, because if you're doing it in any way that matters, in any way that's honest, you're learning so much and you're challenging yourself throughout the whole thing. And so with this, I'm delving into one of the most like personal and deeply held things in my life, which is the place of faith in my life. And um, it absolutely, I mean, you're going to come out the end of it a different person. So much so that it's not like I can even point to, oh, yeah, I learned this, or yeah, I turned around on this. I think you're always a different person when you come out the other end of making anything, and with this movie, especially so.
So what is next for
I,
Monsieur Blanc?
Monsieur Blanc is a little rest. I've done three. This is the third one in a row, and it's not like I'm burned out on making them at all. In fact, I feel
Right.
energized after
Just
making
love a
this one.
cozy
But
mystery.
I love it. I love it. But
I
I do
love that.
have, I have a completely different thing that's kind of it's kind of like a paranoid thriller. You remember like
Ooh,
the
yeah,
parallax view, like
yeah.
it's kind of in that mode. So it's not a mystery movie. It's not a Benoit Blanc movie. But I hope that I can keep coming back. If I can keep coming back and occasionally making one of these for the rest of my life, I'd be very happy. We'll see.
And I enjoy it when people dive in and they're not afraid
Yeah.
to especially for faith. Like I why we all as Catholics watch a Daredevil on Netflix. We're like, yeah,
Mhm.
this is great. This is great. And
Uh,
then it goes over to Disney and they just drained that out. They had a full bucket and they just left a cup. And I'm like, oh, well, what? And I want to ask, what are you afraid of? What do you think will happen if you leave it in there other than you have a
yeah.
hit like Netflix did? So what exactly? And of course, they did massive rewrites, and I don't know. It was a whole
Uh,
process. I don't know what happened with that. But
yeah.
like, what did you do that for? What are you afraid of? Really?
Um,
Because,
this,
you bought a property that was a hit and it had this element, and you decide,
yeah.
like, oh, we can't. Why?
There's a lot of fear. It's very interesting also though, because I mean, specifically talking about in terms of faith or religion, like I think having grown up, because I did grow up Christian, and because I was very specifically also a young man as a Christian. And so it I don't know. I think that people who grow up outside of the world of faith, or who have never had that, have some perception that they have to handle it with kid gloves, or they're going to offend anyone who's a Christian. The reality is, having
Don't do
been
that on our
a teenager as
behalf.
a
We're
Christian,
pretty tough.
that's what
We
I'm
can take it.
saying.
Go for it.
I think of it, yeah, that's the thing. If you've actually been a Christian, you know that it's a rough and tumble thing. It's a conversation. Also, again, as a teenage boy who was a Christian, lots of farting and church jokes. I mean, there's like,
Oh,
you can't shock us. We've actually, if it's been part of your life, you actually live with it. It's something that you learn, that you feel okay not handling with kid gloves. And I think especially you add in the fear in the film and media world of turning off audiences or like, scaring away audiences or offending people, that commercial element that comes in. But I know for
Look at
me,
K-pop Demon Hunter.
yeah,
Specificity breeds universality.
that's it. I love
We're all
that. Yeah.
humans in the end. Don't
Yeah.
milk toast it. Go for it.
I mean, as you can see, that's my attitude.
Yeah.
As you can see in my movies, I totally agree with you.
Well, the
Yeah.
priest at work did say the Monsignor would have been booted.
Oh yeah, I think he would have.
He would have
I
been.
mean,
We know why he's there, but he would have been
uh,
wounded.
I know. And to be fair, he represents definitely. I never had sat in a pew in church or anywhere remotely like that. I will say he represents a cloud of ideas that were very,
Yeah.
very real when I was in the church. But and I needed that character to be almost like a Captain Ahab, like complete
Yeah.
apotheosis of all of those things because it has to drive Father Judd to the extreme that he gets to by the end of that first act.
Yeah.
So in a way, that's kind of like, the necessity of storytelling. But yeah, yeah, yeah. I would hope he would be booted. I would expect it.
He would be good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Okay. This was such a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm eager to see your version of the parallax view.
Well, I'll get back to writing.